Greetings, dear listeners. This is Jonah Goldberg, host of the Remnant podcast, brought to you by the Dispatch and Dispatch Media. It is the day after our giant Remnant/Dispatch meetup at the American Enterprise Institute last night. I think it was a really successful event. I'll talk more about that after I get rid of today's guest, if I can.
Yeah, where was my invitation?
I didn't think you were going to come to Washington for it. No. Longtime listeners of GLOP already know who this person is. But I have with me a dear friend, someone I've been podcasting with. I've been cheating on both National Review and the Dispatch, podcasting with for, I don't know, like a decade.
We play well with others, but you have an open relationship with everyone.
I guess that's right.
You're poly.
Yeah. I mean, I still, let me just say your name. This is Rob Long, everybody. Everybody meet Rob Long. Rob Long is the other punctuation mark with me amidst John Podhoretz's monologues on the GLOP podcast. And
so this is what your voice sounds like.
Yeah, it's kind of wild to be able to take a breath and then talk. And I've used this analogy a million times before, but it's particularly fitting because for Remnant listeners who, for some bizarre reason, don't know, Rob was a producer of Cheers, a writer on Cheers, and also an executive producer eventually on Cheers, correct? Yes?
That's correct. That's correct.
And one of my favorite little bits from Cheers was when they go to the bowling alley to play against Pete's Old Town Tavern, I think it was.
Yeah.
And Norm gets up to go get a beer from the bar at the bowling alley.
Yeah.
And they hear him open the door, and the entire crowd at the bar at the bowling alley yells, "Norm!" Yeah. And when he comes back, they're like, how do you know those guys? And he's like, I have a life, you know. And that's how I feel about when I do GLOP. Is like, I'm welcome there, but it's like not my other stuff.
This is true. This is where you're in the big seat.
So let's start with the inspiration for having you on here was that, as you know, I'm a massive friend of labor.
Yeah, of course.
And
me too, by the way.
Yeah. And the Hollywood writers have gone on strike. And so I believe that means you are on strike. Is that correct?
As of midnight, I'm on strike. As of midnight, I've refused to do any writing or work at all. No, yeah, I'm on strike. I think we're affiliated with the Teamsters, I think. Or maybe AFL-CIO. It's something inappropriate for a Hollywood writer to be associated with. But that's how that works. Yeah, we are on strike, which means for your delicious anticipation, at some point, I think it's inevitable there will be a photograph of me with a picket sign, probably marching. I'm in New York, so they'll probably tell me to go march around the Rockefeller Center or Sony, probably maybe Sony here at Madison Square. So someplace, I hope it's someplace walkable. But that I will be striking.
And this also explains why. I mean, again, it's a podcast, so people just have to take my word for it. You're wearing these faded industrial denim overalls and your sort of Leninist beret right now.
Well, you know, when you call tools down, or as the Writers Guild says, pencils down, which they do actually. That is their phrase. The thing about it is that you're making a joke, but my first Writers Guild meeting, which was now 1990, I've been a member of the Writers Guild for 33 years. There was some guy stood up. It was a bunch of years after the previous strike. And he stood up, this old man, and he wore he's wearing a Greek fisherman's cap. And at a certain point, when you're old enough in the Writers Guild, they gave you a Greek fisherman's cap that you had to wear to all the meetings so you could look like a proletariat. And he stood up, and he was wearing like he's wearing like the Canadian tuxedo, like a denim shirt and jeans. And everybody can speak because they're all writers. He raised his hand, and he had something to say about the studios, and he unleashed this barrage of incredible obscenity. I mean, like not just blue, but like unbelievably graphic invective. The older writer sitting next to me who knew him nudged me and said, "He writes children's books," which was true. So there's a lot of cosplay. All the emails from the Writers Guild always say "in solidarity," and solidarity with our brothers and sisters. A lot of that. There's a lot of that.
But in fairness, you've been critical of the strikes in the past. I think that's fair to say, or the union in the past.
Oh yeah.
But you were the last we talked about this, you were suggesting that you might actually be in favor of the strike. What is your actual view on the merits? Or are you, we should be clear to the listeners, are you allowed to give your honest opinion on this? Or will you get beaten up with a bag of a pillowcase full of oranges if you do?
Yeah, it'll be like on the waterfront. Bobo and his team will come and beat me up. I am allowed to say what I think. I have been doing it for a long time. It has not made me very popular in the Writers Guild to say what I think.
Or in the world beyond.
In the world beyond. Look, I can't control that.
Yeah.
But in this case, I think, and when I used to do a commentary on public radio in LA I did it for 16 years, and every now and then I talk about the strike, and I talked about the one we had in 2007. And I thought that was very silly. I thought it was a waste of time. And lasted for about 14 weeks, went on too long, and it was about nothing, and we got nothing. I thought it was dumb when they decided we all had to fire our agents to rewrite the agent contract. I thought that was dumb. And I was fully prepared to think this is dumb too, because, I'm one of these people who does not even believe a broken clock is right twice a day. I think the broken clock is just wrong all the time. But then I was reading what they were asking for, and there's a whole bunch of it that just seems kind of silly, and the stuff you put in and you can't really get and you shouldn't really be asking for. And some of it is anachronistic and just needs to be tossed out. The residual idea, right now, writers are getting residuals based on reruns of their shows and streaming residuals, so that's good. But that's eventually going to sunset. There's no way you can possibly do that, in the way people pay for entertainment now. And then there's a whole section of things which are really a bit about how the business is going to sustain itself going forward. Whether you could be a young person and come to LA and struggle and write and break into a business, and whether that business, when you break into it, will allow you to live normally. And a lot of that is on the table. And I actually feel like there is rare moments where I can't even think of one right now where a union is arguing to the management that this is going to make the business that you're in healthier, and this is going to make it easier for you to find hit TV shows. That we are all aligned financially, but you have been mismanaging your side of the business, which I think is something it's hard to argue with. I don't think that I don't think Bob Iger, who runs Disney, would argue with that. There's a reason why they're laying off 4,000 people, or 5 or 10 at some point, right? There's a reason. It's because they've horribly mismanaged their side of the business. So something has to happen. And I think this will this is going to be a benefit for the studios, right? Because I don't know how many days they get legally. They're allowed to force majeure every contract and every deal they have, which means they can fire everybody. Or they can suspend and extend, which is what they did with us years ago, which is always a drag because it means and as soon as this is over, you come right back to work, right? But that will allow them they're going to have, if this thing lasts, if it doesn't get solved in the next couple of weeks, it's going to last. And it'll allow them to force majeure people. They'll have 2 or 3 really good quarters because, you have a great quarter when you're not paying anybody.
Right.
And you're not making any TV shows or movies.
And all your competitors are in the same boat, right? That's
exactly.
The key here is
right.
If everyone's got a wet blanket on you, then you don't have to worry about losing market share to people who don't have the same disadvantages as you got.
Except there are people who don't have the same disadvantages. And there are people called not Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And
hate those guys.
And I would have said, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, Americans are not going to watch something that's not American. Are you crazy? Well, one of the biggest shows in the past 18 months has been Squid Game, which is this South Korean thing, which was crazily in South Korean. You watched it. It was set in South Korea, and people spoke Korean. It was crazy. And Americans loved it. So I don't know. No one has any leverage here. It really is sort of an existential. I mean, the Writers Guild is kind of typically overwriting everything and saying this is an existential threat to writers and artists, which it's not. But I'm not sure I know another way to solve this without a big reset, a big stinking reset, which is going to hurt a lot of people. Certainly in LA when production stops, and here in New York. but I'm not sure. I don't see another way. I don't. Unfortunately. So I'm going to be in this weird position of marching around with a picket sign.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I
think it's. I have changed my hostility towards private sector unions a good deal over the last 10 years, because at the very least, I mean, the writers maybe not, but like in general, like private sector unions understand that you need a private sector to have the union, right? The business needs to exist. And so there is some forcing mechanism for coming to a reasonable conclusion. Public sector unions, so my grandkids will pay for my lavish lifestyle. Screw that. But so like, I'm open to the idea that like the Writers Guild is right on this one.
Well, the difference here, the complexity here is that usually when you have a private sector union, it's everyone's doing kind of roughly the same job. So all the machinists are over there, and all these guys are there, and all these guys are over there. They're all kind of doing all the UPS. They're all doing the same job. I drive around, I deliver UPS packages, there's a unified system. And in this, you have it's complicated because the richest people in the Writers Guild are mostly executive producers or showrunners, right? And they're a huge part of my salary and their salary. What I get is negotiated by my agent. It's based on my quote, what I've done in the past. Has nothing to do with the Writers Guild, and only a bare minimum of that is I owe dues on 1.5% of the gross, or an alternative minimum tax, if you will. That's what they really do. So you have the grandees in the Writers Guild, multimillionaires, centimillionaires in the Writers Guild, marching around the studio gates saying they've been mistreated. And then in the companies themselves, like, what does Amazon really have? Amazon has nothing to do with Warner Brothers Discovery. I mean, nothing. Amazon is richer than a country. It has nothing to do. Its motion picture and television production arm is, I mean, my God, it must be a tiny subset. It's a money-losing subset. Disney and Amazon have nothing to do with one another. Amazon's trying to sell you toothpaste. They just want you to watch so they can sell you toothpaste. So the idea those companies are negotiating, they have different priorities too. So that argues that either this will get settled soon because they only can possibly agree on the other side can only agree on 2 or 3 things, or it'll go on for a long time because there needs to be a lot of like coming together on the part of the studios on what their threshold really is.
Let me ask this way. So my dad, when I was a little kid, he would often say to me, for all you do around here, we could replace you with a monkey. And right. I didn't like hearing this, and it caused me some angst. But he thought it was hilarious. There's everyone just keeps saying it as if like everyone, like I see all these reporters, with this hazard pay duty of reporting from the strike area, and they're all like, and of course they're very worried about the impact of AI and how they could all be replaced by AI. And no one ever explains to me what that would look like. I mean, it seems to me it's kind of like saying we can replace you with a monkey to a certain extent in that.
Yeah. Oh, good monkey. It's a very bright monkey.
Yeah. Like, on the right tail of the bell curve of monkeys. But like, what are they really going to say to ChatGPT? Give me a 22-minute script about a kid from the inner city living with a fabulous white family on the upper East Side. I mean, there's like, and they're just going to spit it out, and it's going to seem like it's original, not plagiarized or anything like that.
Well, I mean, you were referring to, of course, to Different Strokes.
I am.
Which I do believe could have been written by ChatGPT. So it all depends. I mean,
what you talking about, Rob?
It could. I mean, I was talking about this last night. Like, yeah, if you could create a hypothetical scenario in which there is a system that is so smart it can write jokes and stuff, and if that happens, then yeah, I think that would hurt the employment possibilities for a lot of people. I don't think that's imminent. I mean, I think that I haven't seen anything from ChatGPT that I've seen things grammatically correct and interesting and factual and pretty good summaries of stuff, but I haven't seen anything that felt like it was a joke. It was sort of joke-ish. Jokes are kind of mysterious. I think you could write. I think you could write daytime drama. In fact, I think they're going to be writing daytime drama that way, because at a certain point, it's the actor doing the face that approximates the emotion. You know, like people are watching the actor on screen, which I think is true a lot of times. You know, some of the best scenes you've ever seen in the film, if you read them in the script, they don't make that much sense, or they're not that good, but somehow the actor made it work. And I would say this with episodes of any good TV show, certainly the ones I worked on when they were hitting their stride, was that if you came to the table reading, which is the first day, and you read, and you sat there with the cast as they read the script, the written script, the first draft, and then you came to the shoot and you compared those two, the shooting script and the table draft. The shooting script sometimes doesn't really make that much sense. A lot of the connective tissue has been removed. A lot of the little filigrees on lines have been removed because it's had a week of rehearsal where the actors have brought so much to it that it's a better show, but a worse printed document. And I think that ultimately is one of the problems. I think that one of the things that the studios have done that's been a mistake, and I think people have felt that when they watch TV, that there's nothing really compelling them to sit down and watch it. It feels like homework, some of it. And that's because I think they've overproduced, and if they haven't done ChatGPT, they already think of content as sort of a ChatGPT thing, like a giant, you know, salami roll. You just keep slicing it, and it'll be fine. I think that's the mistake, and that'll have to change. And I don't think it's going to necessarily be great for the writers, because there'll be fewer writers employed in the future. But
yeah, no, I can see that.
Content.
I could see how you would get some AI system to lay down the tracks and then, or the foundation, and then you punch up, right? Because I think that's what ChatGPT is going to do for a lot of people, is that it's going to write first drafts for a lot of people, you know, particularly college kids. I don't think in 10 years there's not going to be a single term paper that the first draft of which wasn't written by some AI instead of them.
And that's true, but I'm just based. I was an English major, so the exams that I did the best on, and the ones that I thought were that I remember, that I learned the most, actually, were the ones you sat and you write an exam. Like, sitting and writing an exam is an ancient thing, and we'll just go back to that.
Yeah, I know. Look, I took all my savings out and invested massively in manufacturers of blue books.
Good. That was smart.
Yeah, because I think there's just going to be a huge run on them.
Oh yeah,
you know?
Right.
So where to go from here? So, I was going to say, when you were talking about the how the actors bring a lot to it, I happened to catch recently. I know you're not a huge Friends fan, right? I mean, that's not.
No, I liked it. It just was. It was on when I was like busy. I didn't see that many of them.
Yeah.
But you know, Friends is one of those shows that is a great example of writer and actor development.
There's a great episode I caught recently. It was on the background. Joey Tribbiani teaches at the Learning Annex, acting for soap operas, and he explains how if you hear shocking news, sometimes he's explaining that there's another form of acting that he finds very difficult. It's called reacting. So here are some tips, and one of them is, if you hear something shocking, you make a face like you got a fish hook stuck in your eyebrow, right? That pulls it up. And if you hear really bad news that you have trouble processing, I just try to figure out what 33 times 562 is, and then just see his eyes darting back and forth. It was actually pretty well done.
That's really good. Yeah. But that's a good. Friends have a really good example of the magic that happens when you're broke, or you have hired by mistake. You've hired the right people. So NBC was broke. They were having trouble. They hired the right people, but they thought they were the wrong people to do the show. These people came to the site with the idea. It was called the Courtney Cox Show for a long time, because she was the most well-known person. And it was just about 6 young people hanging around in New York City, and that was pretty much it. And NBC, I was doing a show at the NBC, doing a pilot at NBC at the time, and NBC was like, this is never going to go because it's all about young people, and the people who control the remote at home are middle-aged women, usually the mom. And there's no mom character as the way in. They say the way into the show for our crucial viewer. It didn't test very well. There were no stars in it. It had Matthew Perry in it, which at that point he had been in a million busted pilots, and everybody thought, well, Matthew Perry, why even bother, right? And then the show was like a 40 share, because any hit of anything, of any kind, is a mistake. Someone blew it. The system did not work. The system's designed to squash that, and there's no Chat GPT that can anticipate that, and there's no formula. There's no no guy can sit there and reverse engineer a hit at the top at Warner Brothers Discovery or Sony or wherever. You have to try everything, and you have to hope. And that's not a great business model, but that doesn't mean it's not the business model. It just means that Hollywood has always been a bad business model.
All right, so I started to tell you about this in the virtual green room, as it were, where all the real money in podcasts is made anyway.
Yeah, that's true. And that's where the gold is, Jonah. I keep saying that.
And longtime listeners of this podcast know that I have this mild obsession with The Daily from the New York Times. And I only ever listen to it like when I got to go do TV or I'm running a column on the exact topic that The Daily is on. That's about 99% of the time. It's sort of like I'm doing homework, I'm in the car, try to get up to speed on what's going on, that kind of thing. And usually those are the ones where it's a reporter from the Times and they're just talking, the reporter's just summarizing the reporting, and that's useful to me. That's what. But Barbero has this, he is active listening. I don't know, I think that's what you would call it, where he telegraphs that he is listening, and he's like letting the audience know this is what should be shocking or interesting to you too. And I swear he sounds, once you get it in your head, or like once I got it in my head, that he sounds like he was, I'll put this delicately, struggling in a bathroom stall.
That is delicate. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean alone. He's struggling alone in the bathroom stall.
Yes.
I just want to make sure we were clear what's going on in the bathroom stall.
Yes. And there's just ever so slight between the gastrointestinal Stockovite effort. There's also a vaguely erotic sound to it. Okay,
well, that's for our next session, Jonah.
Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. I get it. So, but the person who's talking is talking about very serious things. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is let's just pick a serious event.
Okay.
You can describe the lead up to World War II, something you know about, right? But that has dramatic things going on in it. And I'm Michael Barbero, listening to you. We have not rehearsed this. You did not know I was going to do this. And it may not work, and we'll just cut it. So, but lead up to the Civil War, assassination link, whatever you want. It doesn't really matter.
Well, why don't we keep it on topic? That way, it'll be. Okay. You can actually refer to this as a moment when you stayed on topic for the.
Oh, that's
for the straining gag.
Wow. Okay, go ahead.
Well, if you look at the past 18 months, you've seen 4,000 people laid off.
Oh.
You've seen the head of Comcast, president of Comcast, NBC, Universal fired. Ironically fired.
You have to stay straight.
Oh, sorry, but it's not easy. I think he may lay this track in later.
I think it might be a soundboard, and like he's just sort of like, all right, bring up the grunt.
Or maybe he's listening to the guy on his phone while recording.
Yeah, in
the stall. So it is actually both of the things that you think it is. And then they fired the head of NBC Universal for doing, who had a few years before fired Ronnie Meyer, who was head of Universal, for doing exactly the same thing. So you're looking at this general chaos which is rare in show business at the top. And then you compare it to the writers who are feeling that there's no. This is not as dramatic, is it? I mean, that's the problem with the strike. It just isn't dramatic.
Ah. All right, we're done. I don't have to do this anymore. But like, you get the point. It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have Francis Fukuyama on and try this out. So
yes, you could. There was an old Saturday Night Live sketch that Harry Shearer did, where he's like a morning DJ in the booth interviewing somebody who was coming. I think it was maybe the host was in town. You know, one of those guys coming in. You're in town. You're going to be performing, and he is cleaning up the booth, putting all the carts back, and then running the booth while he's conducting this interview. So he like put some stuff on the shelf, goes, yeah, then you came to the amp, and then go back. He's like not listening. It's great. That whole bit, that's great. And then it was great. It was a version of that, which is sort of active listening, but you're definitely doing something else. I'm not that, but what do you think that? Do you think he does that in person?
I have no idea. It's so weird and distracting to me. And now the problem is I will start to tune out what, like, you know, Maggie Haberman's on there talking about the latest Trump trial or whatever, and I'm just waiting for the I mean, all these weird sounds, and it drives me crazy. And he also does this thing where he's trying to force out his question while he's clearly distracted by something else, and sometimes it sounds onanistic, and sometimes it sounds gastrointestinal, but both. And sometimes it sounds both. You know,
you're down there in the root chakra, no matter where.
Yeah. All right, so this is too much glop style content.
I was going to say,
for the Remnant.
Why did you not save this? This feels like this really doesn't feel like it's a highfalutin Remnant dispatch content. This feels like glop.
It's very glop, but this is part of my desire to have you on, is do a little advertising for glop.
Oh, that's nice of you. Thank
you.
And
if people want
more of that,
more sort of jocularity and juvenilia, they should go back and find the episode where we talked about the game of cornholing.
Remember that? I've had people come up to me and tell me that every now and then they re-listen to it.
Yeah,
which is like, well, it wasn't as if we wrote the material out. That it's
it's the only episode I've ever. It's literally the only episode of Glop I've ever listened to. And it's one of the only 4 podcasts I've been on that I've ever listened to.
I don't think I've ever listened to anything I've been on. And the other one that I still laugh remembering is not so much that we laugh, but that John Podhoretz could not get through the ad for kitty poo, the kitty litter. That way he just lost it. And I remember thinking, like, what's he laughing at? Because I hadn't read ahead, and I'm reading, it is kind of funny. But he simply couldn't get through it.
Yeah, and he would do these riffs about how, like, I'm the editor of one of the foremost intellectual journals in America, and I'm sitting here reading about kitty poo.
right. Which was sort of interesting, because the idea that would excuse you from it. It would seem to be that should be your punishment.
Well, also that great line of Marxists who had written for commentary when it was back in a radical journal are like, we were right about capitalism. It turns everything to garbage, you know.
Right.
You're becoming a shill for commercial bourgeois interests. You know?
And yet it's a I mean, I don't have a cat, but it seems like a good product.
Yeah.
It seemed. I don't know if it still is a product. That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know.
Maybe it was a product that's just trying to find its, find its purpose.
Paupers. So, have you been watching Succession?
I haven't been watching the latest Succession, but I have been watching I'm familiar with it. Yeah, I'm saving the last. I haven't. The stuff that's happened, I'm not. It seems to be spinning a little out of control for me anyway. So
I think that's right. And I think the only reason I asked is because Pod won't let us talk about it on Glop, because he has this weird, perverse loyalty thing about News Corp, and he feels too close to it. And I feel like that ship has sort of sailed, but he hasn't watched it, and so it's one of those few things that he hasn't watched. And so I thought we could talk about it here. But
they have watched it.
I don't want to get you in trouble, since you are on that Fox thing from time to time.
Fox.
But do you have any thoughts about
breaking news?
How all that worked out?
Yeah. Well, I was
Mrs.
there.
Lincoln.
I was there. I was doing Gutfeld on that Monday,
uh-huh.
And when the story broke, and they just sent the topics, and I was still working on this. The story broke, and I texted him. I said, "Should I wear a bow tie tonight in solidarity? Quiet, silent solidarity." And at first he was like, "Yeah, it'd be great. It'd be fun." And then he said, "Don't. No, actually, no, don't. We've yeah." I think there are two things going on. Well, three really. One is that you know you're going to have to fire him. You're going to have to fire Tucker at some point if you're paying attention to your total lack of control over what he says and his complete and utter contempt for the people in charge. So you know it's going to happen. You know it's going to happen. It's going to happen at some point. Whether it happens now or a year from now or 2 years, it's only going to get worse and harder a year or two from now. So there is a management argument to doing it right then. And then if you read all the redacted texts and emails, you realize how much contempt he has for the person he reports to. And so she can in no way be expected to manage him. You can't turn to her and say, "Oh, this guy who called you that name, yeah, tell him he's got to do this or that." Like, she can't do that. Now he's your direct report, which is nobody wants, right? You don't want that. So you're going to have to do it. Just separate. This is separate from the $787 million. And then I understand he wasn't named in any of those suits, really, or he wasn't the prime, villain there. It was Lou Dobbs or Maria Bartiromo, or Ginny Piro, or there's one other one I can't remember, who are worse. But he represents the consciousness of the company. So if you were Dominion, or definitely if you're Smartmatic, you're saying, no, this is the number one guy. This is your primetime lineup. They all knew it was a lie, which means that the company knew it was a lie, and the company's on trial. So all the emails and texts that were released really were damning. I mean, that is why there was a settlement. And then there's this weird third bad management thing, which, I mean, I've said, so I'm sure it won't enamor me to the management at Fox, but that was a place that used to be run really, really well. Whether you liked it or you didn't like it, it was run very, very well. Everybody knew where everybody stood, and everybody knew who the boss was. And one of the things I remember, just to name drop, that because acquaintanceship with Rupert Murdoch, was he used to roll his eyes and complain and make very funny jokes. He's very funny about the grandee element in Hollywood, that he hated, like, he just wanted out of that show business for a long time. He didn't like the pageantry of those people. He didn't like their pomposity. He didn't like the fact that the president of Fox, 20th Century Fox, had 6 assistants. And Rupert Murdoch, who owned that company and a bunch of other companies, had one secretary that, by the way, it was his dad's secretary. He brought her over from Australia.
I will say one thing, though. I sight unseen, no first-hand experience. I bet you she was a damn good secretary.
She was really good.
Yeah.
She was really good. And a lovely person, sort of no nonsense. But that was, he didn't. I had lunch with him once, and he said, "Oh, let's have lunch. I'll be back in New York in 2 months. Let's have lunch on like Tuesday the 13th." He's just saying this to me. I'm like, okay, fine. And I'm like, that's not going to happen, but okay, fine. And then, you get an email from his secretary saying, "So Tuesday the 13th." There is still no pretension about him, right? So he didn't like all that, and he preferred the news. But unfortunately, the part of the news that he's in that generates the $800 million in free cash every year is the show business part of news. So whether you like it or you don't like it, he's just dealing with insane stars like you would be if you were making a movie. I mean, these people are not, they're celebrities. And so talent management is just as important, maybe actually more important now for him, because he's been personally liable. Not personally, but the company's been liable for what their talent was saying, because the talent wasn't being managed. You can't run away from that. If you put something on a screen, whether it's news or movies or TV or a sitcom, it's show business, whether you like it or not. And you're going to have to treat the people on it like stars, because whether you like it or not, they are. And I was just surprised that when they fired Tucker, just being inside that one day, and then a few days later just talking to people, how lousy and amateur hour, the firing was and the handling of it with their big stars, it just seemed like that alone was part of the problem. Like that everybody was jittery. Like, well, why? Like if you there are people on that show, that network that you love, and you're the manager of that network, those people should have known it within 25 minutes of the firing. You buy them a car, a carton of cigarettes, or like expensive scotch. You go to the set where they're on, and you tell them how much you love them. You do all the stuff that talent managers do, because that's the business you're in.
So I agree with most of that. I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds because I just did this special live Remnant last night with me, Steve, and Styrwalt, and we
great. Oh, well.
we did a lot of airing of the grievances about the Fox stuff. But I think the one thing that I think, because this is a point I was making last night, is like, put Tucker aside for just 2 seconds. If you, all right, so you have option A is pay $787,500,000. Okay, that's option A.
And that's only, and there's 2 more coming.
Yeah, no, just we're doing a binary thing here. So option A is that. Then option B is endure $100 million, $50 million in legal expenses, have all of your dirty laundry aired in the national media for 3 months, and then pay $787,500,000. Most people would pick A, right? Because if you're going to, it's like, and so I think the thing that kind of changed everything was, which explains why they waited to settle on the courthouse steps, is that this whole issue of how Rupert is in fact an officer of Fox News and not just an officer of the parent company. And so therefore he was directly implicated and would have to testify and all that kind of stuff. And Rupert was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And their lawyers were like, yeah, he's not doing that. And like, I've been a longtime defender of Rupert in all sorts of ways. I don't think he's covered himself in glory in the last few years, but he's 92 friggin' years old. And like you don't want a 92-year-old on the stand, because like 92-year-olds might have good reason to just have a sort of screw it, what have I got to lose kind of attitude about how they talk. And that's if they're compos mentis.
Yeah, I mean, he was deposed.
It did not go well.
It did not go well for him, but he told the truth. That's why it didn't go well. It wasn't as if it didn't go well because they caught him in a bunch of lies. He told the truth. He said, "This is what he answered the question honestly the way you're supposed to. He played by the rules."
Well, he also could have done a lot more I do not recalls and a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, I think for him, I mean, he is always since the voicemail scandal in Britain, a bunch of years ago, which took down one of his papers. He has always been an advocate of not sending emails and texts. Like, do not put it in writing, which is very good corporate hygiene anyway. Yeah, I think that's part of the question. The other issue is there's a whole bunch of redacted discovery from Dominion. There's additional discovery for Smartmatic. All of that discovery will be going to Abby Grossberg in her lawsuit that is specifically about Tucker. In addition to more discovery, there is stuff in that redacted material that we haven't seen that at least, whether this is true or not, at least the position of management at that company has been to its employees, take a breath before you come out in solidarity with your fallen brother, because there's more to come out, and we don't want you to look stupid. Now that could be true. It also could be untrue. That's what I would say that even wasn't true if I was running that company, is to keep everybody shut up and get a little scared. But it is highly likely. There's nothing about those texts or emails that suggest restraint. So who knows what's in there? I mean, who knows? We know that the 2 most powerful officers of that company know what was in there. And their decision was rip the Band-Aid off today. So there's,
Yeah, I'm just saying, the reason I brought it up was, 1, I think there's a lot of bad lawyering going on, shockingly bad lawyering, and 2, that there's a lot we just don't know, right? There's a lot. There's. I don't buy any of the individual theories about why they fired Tucker.
Why they fucker tire?
But I think them in combination gets you pretty close, right? And because you wouldn't, if you were going to clean house of the people who lied about the election, you wouldn't take the one of those implicated. You wouldn't take the one who lied the least and was the most valuable. You would fire the one who lied the most and was the least valuable. Now you could say that was what's his name, Lou Dobbs.
Lou Dobbs, right? Which they did.
Well, I only found out last night is still alive and has a Twitter account.
Yeah, Maria Bartiromo will probably go. Probably Janine Pirro will go. Be slow. They should fire them all today. They shouldn't wait. But I mean, I don't think the management there is that agile. It all goes down to like a elemental, very stupid business decision, which is like businesses make all the time. Which is the very beginning. They got too close to the candidate. At the very best, the Trump administration was going to last 8 years, right? That's its apex. It couldn't go past 8 years, and that is a very, very narrow window to bet your entire company on. The News Corp and Fox News has a larger future and a bigger future and more years to think about than just those 8. And when they threw it all in for a guy who, whether he was great or bad or terrible or the best president ever, it doesn't matter what you think, was freshness dated at the beginning. He knew when he was going to expire. It was just kind of very, very, very foolish. And then to try to be cute about it at the end and get out of it some way and keep everybody happy was just that's just above their pay grade. First of all, nobody can do that. But also just the idea that you thought you could do that there was some way, that there was some, even in those emails, you could just see how actors sometimes think they're smarter than they are. And I don't mean that Tucker's not a smart guy, but when he wrote the email, it was about, look, it's hurting the company. What we're doing is hurting the company. Look at the stock price. I just thought, oh my God, what a moron. What a child. What a fool. This is what every movie star says when they think they understand climate change. Like, what a moron. You have no idea what is happening to the stock price. You have no idea how audiences work. You have no idea how the ratings work. It's going to go down and up and down and up. And the stock price was never lower than when Rupert Murdoch tried to combine the companies. Should he have been fired? I mean, it's like, this is stupidity. Get out and get out fast. Just say what happened and then move. And then some people go to Newsmax, and that's fine. And those people will come back. Some people, who knows? But the idea that these are forces that you can tame and control and channel and ease into the truth was just that's just childish.
Yeah. So like this gets at the heart of basically. So I wrote this piece 20 years ago. God, it sucks getting old. About how, do you ever see the Sam Raimi movie, A Simple Plan?
Oh yeah.
I argue that it was maybe the most conservative movie of the 1990s because the whole gist of it was you had this nice guy, decent guy, married, starting a family, running a business, acted with honesty and integrity, and then his half-wit brother and his half-wit brother's friend have this idea that let's just keep this money we found. It's a simple plan. Keep the money we find in the woods. What could go wrong, right? And like Billy Bob Thornton at one point says, this is the American dream. And Bill Pullman says, the American dream is you work for the American dream. And then Thornton says, this is better. and the irony of the simple plan is that it turns out like if you just do call the balls and strikes, you do the right thing the right way, you act with integrity, it's a hedge against unforeseeable screw ups, right? If you think you're always going to be smarter, you can outsmart events and that you know what's coming around the corner, you're just going to get blindsided eventually. It could work for you a little while. I've long thought that the reason why Trump is such a chaos agent in our politics is he's one of these, there's always one monkey. If you get enough monkeys throwing darts at the stock pages, eventually you're going to get the greatest stock picker in world history. But like, that's not a reason for like having a monkey pick stocks. It's that he's done the wrong thing and it's worked for him so many times that he no longer has this ability to understand risk taking the right way. And he's just this weird black swan statistical outlier. If you go through life, you're still going to have bad luck and good luck and all that kind of stuff. But if you go through it with a little honesty and a little integrity and you stay in your lane, the upside might be a little lower in some cases, but the downside is going to be much better than in other cases. And at the end, you're going to be okay. And Fox went for the quick win by like going all in on Trump, which is a violation of journalistic ethics. It's a violation of like sort of the long-term fiduciary obligation to do things the right way. And now they're getting the pendulum's going back on them, and they're getting the penalties for all the gains that they got the last few years. The House is taking its money back.
The House is getting, I think that's exactly the way to put it. I mean, I know some people who went to work for Trump and who work for Trump, and they almost all have the same, except for the 100% all in Moonies, right? Most of them have this kind of, I think I can handle him. I think I know. The thing about him is he blah, 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 all this like condescending to the president because he's mentally and emotionally unstable, but I can handle him. Let me tell you, if I'm there, I can help shape the blah, 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 blah. None of that worked. And Trump, in many ways, represents the audience in general, the giant id of the audience, where people think, I think we know what people want. Like if you're head of NBC in 1992, like nobody wants a show about the American people do not want to see 6 young people in New York City. They don't. They need a middle-aged woman. That's what we like. All the smart people, and that's what they did for him. But also they did it. It wasn't even like the great thing about a cable operation like that is you have two income streams that are related, right? You have audience, which is you sell advertising against, which are not that great, but not terrible. I mean, their number one show, Tucker, lost about $80 million, $85, $90 million over 2-3 years with these advertising boycotts. And then you have intensity of the viewer. So if you turn to your cable company, you run Fox, and you say, okay, from now on, Comcast cable or whatever cable, you owe us, $1 per subscriber to carry our news. And the cable operation, their only leverage is to say, no, we're not going to pay you, and we'll just take you off our system. And if it's, I don't know, if it's CNN, you may not have that kind of leverage. How many people are passionately love CNN? Who knows? But that the passionate Fox News viewer is going to complain and dump their cable and do a bunch of other things and cease to be a customer of that cable operation if it doesn't carry Fox News. So you have number and intensity, and you're always playing with those two values, right? And it's great to have the intensity, but that intensity may mean a smaller number. And it's harder to monetize that intensity all the time. So you kind of need to have both. And it really feels a lot like you're going down the middle, and you're being a little bit, you're being conservative, but you're being kind of like establishment conservative. And that's actually a really great place to be financially, right? You may not get the intensity you want, but you're going to get other things. And those people aren't going to, if their cable company says, we're going to take Fox News off, they're not going to say, oh, that, Romney, Rhino, and never Trumper station, forget it. They're going to still want it because the only option is something weirder.
So it's funny we ended up here because I just wrote it's out today, my LA Times column on a related thing, which is, and you have as one of the founders of Ricochet, a longtime friend of National Review, you some firsthand experience with this. Comment sections. There's a Gresham's law of comment sections, which is that the crappiest commenters will crowd out the best, right? Because bad money chases out good, bad feedback chases out good feedback, because the good, decent people, simply by virtue of being good, decent people, they don't want to spend all their time in a comment section anyway. Right. And they certainly don't want to spend all their time in a comment section getting yelled at and called literally Hitler or whatever, right?
Right.
And so they just leave, and then you just leave the place to itself. And it dawned on me that, like, what has happened over the last 7-8 years, first in right-wing media, or just online generally, is the comment sections have taken over, right? And Tim Miller has this chapter in his book about how he calls it centering the comment section, where, like, when he was working on the Jeb Bush campaign, he tried to woo Steve Bannon, who was then running Breitbart, and bring them into the fold. And it was Bannon and guys like him who decided that rather than try to tamp down the role of the commenters, it was to lean into them, to engage them fully, to bring them all in this sort of galvanic way, right? And so we've seen this. There's a lot of right-wing media that is basically written for the comment sections. But now the point I wanted to make was that it's jumped out of that. Fox's respect the audience was really listen to the comment sections, right? This was like Star Walt's text to Bill Salmon was, I'm worried that by catering to the nut jobs, we're scaring away the silent majority that wants us to do the right thing, or something like that, right? And now that's what's happening to the Republican Party. Michelle Cotto had this great piece in the New York Times yesterday or the day before about how Brian Kemp basically has nothing to do with the state GOP in Georgia, right? He's the governor of the state. He says, don't give any money to the state GOP. Give it to my leadership PAC. He's not going to speak at the state party convention, nor is the attorney general, nor is the secretary of state, nor is the insurance commissioner. Like, the actual elected Republicans in the state are like, yeah, we don't want anything to do with that, because the Georgia state GOP, increasingly the Michigan state GOP, they've all been taken over by the election deniers, the QAnon types, the hardcore Trumpists. It's like caddy day at the pool at Bushwood, right? They're just all taken in, and I think that's sort of a big. As a metaphor, I think it explains a lot of the screwed upness of our politics today, is that nobody is doing content moderation of the comment section. So the commenters like run the asylum.
Right. And a lot of that was like, if you I don't know about Brian Kemp. I mean, sort of definitely a governor that I admire, but if you may have gone to a Brian Kemp in the past, 8 years ago or something, when he was, just starting to begin his political career or whatever, he probably had that attitude that people have about, the working for Trump. Like, well, some of them are crazy, but I can handle it. The idea that smart people can control the crazy people somehow, we know how to handle it. They're very enthusiastic and passionate, and we'll figure it out. Or you could I just look at it larger, like 60,000 feet, right? If you look at the country, we went 50 years with one party controlling the House. And then suddenly we've had, I don't know, since 94 Gingrich, we've had, I don't know, I couldn't even count how many speakers of the House we've had. We legitimately say things now that we never said when I was growing up, which was like, I think the House is going to change sides, or I think the Senate's going to change. We never said that. House, Senate changing, House, Senate changing, House, Senate changing constantly. The country votes for, George H.W. Bush, and then Bill Clinton. Those are kind of simple. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, not a big difference. The Bush-Gore campaign really wasn't about much except Medicare Part D. And then suddenly Barack Obama, and then suddenly Donald Trump, and then suddenly Joe Biden, who's in many ways, just not Donald Trump. House and Senate keep switching. And there's this, it's just volatility, right? We're entering this volatility, and there's like a couple ways to interpret it. One is the American people are insane and having a nervous breakdown. And that's what politicians think. If you ask a politician what happened. And then another way is to think that, the American people are trying to get your attention. They're yanking on the leash because you're not giving what they want, because there's a market failure here, which is also really possible, right? Like, we don't want this shit you keep handing us. We want some different stuff. So we keep going crazier and crazier until you figure it out. But the signal is hitting DC or the political elites is like, they want more extreme. Whereas I think what they want is they want you to start walking in the center. That's when you keep pulling the leash, it's because you're trying to get to the center. Or the third thing, which I think is more likely, is that just we're looking at the end of the system. Like, there's, these parties don't last forever. They haven't. Maybe we're looking at the end of it. We're at the tail end of the party system. It's not late stage capitalism, which people love to say. It's late stage American party system. And I'm not sure how that works or if that's going to work, but it certainly feels like that's what the market is saying. It's like, we don't like any of these products. And it comes, I was just saying, it comes at a time when people can flatter themselves that they can slice things very thinly. So if you ask a political consultant what his ultimate goal is, it's like, I'm going to win by one vote, because that's how smart I am. And that's still winning. Whereas the same thing you see in show business, like, we're going to get 1.2 million people to tune in, which, I had put a show on, got 1.2 million people, they would have dragged me to the center of the courtyard and executed me, Game of Thrones style. But now that's considered a success, right? So now it's like, well, is it 1.3 or 1.35? What nobody's doing is saying, why aren't we going for 20? Because that seems hard. But you go for 20, you have a mandate. You can do things. At 20, that's a 20 million people watch your show. That's a hit show.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like, the pristine example. Remember that Carrie Lake, she has a rally like 10 days before the governor's election. And she says, are there any McCain voters in the room? And before people can raise their hands, she says, doesn't matter. Get the hell out of here. And it's like, first of all, neither of us are political professionals, but like, I think we can both agree as a matter of logic that if you were attending a Carrie Lake rally, you are at least open to the idea of voting for her, right?
Yeah, right.
And John McCain, who was 5-term Senate,
popular Arizona figure,
probably the second most successful Republican politician after Barry Goldwater, and since World War II in Arizona. I could be open to correction about that, but it's ballpark, right? And like, it's no. We don't want any of you rhinos in the comments section. We don't want anybody saying, well, I don't think that if you drink your own urine, you'll be immune to COVID. We want everybody who's all in on this stuff, right? And I think that
actually has been, Jonah, that's been proven. I'm going to send you some doc. Yeah, no, you're right. That's right.
And
yeah.
Anyway, I think that it's just astounding to me. So many aspects of the Republican Party would rather have 30-40% of the electorate be true believers and vote for them, and lose to the 40-60% of the electorate that probably doesn't really like Joe Biden very much and would like to vote. Some of whom would like to vote for a Republican, but can't vote for these nutters. And it's a very weird sort of logic of the comment section thing.
Yeah, it's the idea that, like, who would you rather vote for? Someone whose policies and politics you vehemently disagree with, or someone who you think is insane? Right? It's like the difference between, New York City now and New York City in 1990 in terms of crime, right? In crime, you would walk around, you get mugged, and somebody would rob you and take your money. Now, a crazy homeless person is going to push you in front of a train. Which one's more terrifying? Well, if you ask people who live in New York City, it's the crazy person, because you can't even, what on earth is this person's going to push me in front of the train? For no reason. I can't even just throw my money in one direction and run in the other. In fact, street crime like that seems quaint at this point, old-fashioned. So there's that. I think there's also this weird distortion we have now about scale. Like, Americans don't seem to understand scale very much. So they tend to think that Twitter is real, and that somebody who's got 10,000 or 100,000 or a million Twitter followers is somehow influential. We call them influencers, whereas there's no evidence that they influence anything. The evidence is that people watch them, but that they influence something is, except in their very narrow lane. So if you're Khloe Kardashian, and you have a cosmetics company, then the girls who like you are going to buy your cosmetics. So you are influencing in that way. But I used to say this to people, like, at his height, Tucker was getting, I don't know, maybe his top rating was somewhere around 5 million people, maybe. It was not usual. Mostly, I think the average was about 3.5. Which is kind of what Jill Stein got. It's not many people, right? You think of the number of people you need to do anything. I mean, if you're running for president, general election, you need like 70 million people to do a thing for you on a day, most of them on one day, or at least to sit down with their thing and mark it and send it back in. That's really hard. You're still getting 40 million people to vote for you on that day, and 40 million people are voting for the other guy too. I mean, that would be a $1 billion movie opening. No one's ever done that in show business, but they do it in politics all the time. And
people like movies.
Yeah, people like yeah, that's right. They happily go. There's jujubes and milk duds, and yeah, right.
No, people hate our politicians.
Absolutely. So it's a very strange the lack of understanding of scale, the weirdness with people in any kind of political bubble. Not just to think I only want to hear the news I want to hear, which I understand, but that there's only us here. The bubble isn't so much I'm being protected; it's that you begin to think it's only you. You've never met anybody who disagrees with you. So that seems insane to you. And, when I say to conservatives, when I say this on the Rick Shea podcast all the time, it's like, people call me a rhino as if that's an insult. I mean, it is, and I am, but I'm the hope. You need me. You're not going to get to 51% without the rhinos. And if you don't like the 51% rule, then you're in the wrong country. The system was designed to give you the C+ version at best of what you want. The system is designed to kind of not give you what you want, but close, but not really. You're going to get the C+ version because you're going to have to eat a bunch of shit cookies from everybody else to get there. And
75% of a loaf is a huge win in politics, right?
That's just a huge win. It's fantastic. Yeah. And that's how the founders envisioned this.
Right.
And it kind of works.
It was literally Madison's point about how parties should work. And you get coalitions that have shared but not identical interests. And they're kind of like, if we all get together, we can get most of what we want compared to nothing of what we want if the other side wins. And so parties were supposed to expand coalitions and get buy-in from people who were not necessarily on the same page on things,
And to do that, you have to appeal to a lot of people who you disagree with just to get things done. And that is the system. And maybe you don't like it. That's fine to not like it. But it is the system. So you can't pretend it isn't the system. I mean, the people who are absolutely baffled by how Donald Trump lost in 2020, it's like, well, he was an unpopular president everywhere but where you were. Well, everywhere it's like, well, just look, that it's going to happen to Joe Biden too, I suspect.
So it's funny. I mentioned this last week on a podcast here, but this bubble thing, right? It's the people who are most upset about Tucker losing his platform, and the people most jubilant about Elon Musk selling blue check marks for $8 a pop. There's an enormous amount of overlap between the two, because there are a lot of people, particularly on this sort of NatCon kind of world, who think Twitter is the real world. It's everything, right? And they think getting on Tucker is the way you blast out to all of America. All of America is watching Tucker, because everyone they know is watching Tucker, right? And so I just love this so much. People are going to think I'm obsessed, but Yoram Hazony, who's the guru of the nationalism stuff, he tweeted last week, I'm reading this: by making blue checks available to everyone, Elon Musk has initiated a democratic revolution against a ruling elite. The blue check really was a symbol of their power. Losing it mocks their vanity and wounds their pride. And I got to tell you, I had a blue check. I'm actually paying for Twitter Blue now, which a lot of people think makes me a Nazi or something. But I'll probably get rid of it at some point. But the number of people who seem to really think that rich Hollywood types, rich journalist types, who go to their beach houses or their ski houses,
right,
and are drinking
Georgetown cocktail parties.
Yeah, and they're drinking champagne out of their intern slippers or whatever. All of a sudden,
that's a revealing thing to say.
That all comes. Well, that's sort of a Dick Morris thing.
Right.
All comes crashing down because they lost their blue check on Twitter. It's no, the blue check was really important to you, and you're projecting it onto them.
I had a blue check on Twitter, and I think it arrived one day. I thought it was just based on the fact that in my Twitter membership, whatever it is, your Twitter profile, not the public profile, but your your account settings, you had an email address and then a website that was you,
or a real phone number. Yeah,
so a real phone number. Something that they knew it was you. That's how I got it. And I still don't see the value of it, and I don't see what I lost when they took it away. I only on Twitter, I only look at the people that I follow or the people that I follow retweet. And I think that's how it's supposed to be. Any other complication of that seems bizarre to me. But I mean, but the idea of it and the weird kind of misunderstanding of scale. An audience is like I see it now in conservative donors, right-wing donors. I mean, there's nobody I think more useless right now than a right-wing donor. I'm speaking generally. Left-wing. The left-wing. The argument I use is that the very, very wealthy family, entrepreneurial family, gave the money to start ProPublica. ProPublica is enormously influential from a left-wing perspective reporting operation. And it's fully funded, and they've done a really great job building that outfit. They really have. You have to give them credit. If you go to a classic, typical right-wing funder, and you talk about something like that, you're going to fund a book, you're going to fund this, you're going to fund that, or you're going to make videos, whatever you're going to do. Often their question is, can we get this on Tucker? And you're like, well, what's the point of that? Everybody on Tucker already agrees with you. The point is to talk to people who are not on Tucker. You should be saying, can we get this in the New York Times?
Yeah. Or get it on NPR, which has 11 million listeners, morning edition or whatever. Yeah.
Right. And if you say that, they're like, well, why would you want to talk to, like, no, those are liberal. Like, those are the people you need. Like, that's, when you're advertising a consumer packaged good, you have two audiences, right? You have the people who are buying your product all the time. And so you need to reward them with coupons and end caps and new and improved. And then the people who haven't tried your toothpaste, and you need to say better than the other toothpaste and tastes better and now in a new package and whatever. But you have to do both those things or you don't sell your product. And I just think there's a shortage of the crack, and the sheer entertainment value of Fox News has kind of taken over the marketing arm of the conservative movement, which is, I think, going to have generation of failure because of it.
All right, on that happy note, Rob Long, thank you so much for joining us. And I should have you back sometime.
I'm always available, Jonah, not just for show business, but just for general chit chat.
We're going to try and play the Marseillaise, or I don't know what Marseillaise doesn't work. What would we play?
Oh yeah, it's got to be one of those old wobbly, we shall overcome. Together, united, we'll never be just come to. I'll let you know when I'm picketing, and you can just come by and listen to the songs that we're forced to sing.
That would be wonderful. All right. Rob Long, thank you again for joining us.
Happy to.